The wind tore across the plains, rattling the thin wooden walls of Jack McAllister's solitary cabin. Dawn had barely broken, yet the sky burned in streaks of orange and gray, a storm rolling in from the distant hills. Jack stood on the porch, spurs clinking softly, eyes scanning the horizon, haunted by memories that never seemed to fade. Years ago, he had ridden these same plains as a younger man, chasing whispers of conflict and bloodshed. And somewhere in that chaos, he had saved a girl, a child with wide, fearful eyes and a spirit too strong to be broken by the violence around her. The memory came unbidden, sharp and vivid. He could see her, trapped amid the smoke of a burning village, the sound of war drums echoing through the canyon. Fear had radiated off her tiny frame, yet there had been a flicker of trust, a fragile thread that Jack had dared to reach for. He had carried her to safety then, and in doing so, had made a promise he hadn't fully understood, that some connections, forged in desperation, could never truly be undone. A shadow flickered across the plains. Jack squinted through the gusts of wind and dust. A rider was approaching, solitary and deliberate, the outline obscured by the hood pulled low over their face. Dust swirled around the horse's hooves like smoke, and Jack's instincts, honed by years of frontier survival, tensed his muscles. There was danger here, or at least the hint of it. The rider slowed, dismounting with a grace that belied the rough terrain. Jack's heart thumped, a long-dormant anticipation stirring in his chest. Years of solitude had made him wary, yet something in the movement, the tilt of the head, the certainty in the gait, felt hauntingly familiar. He remembered the girl he had saved, but she had been no more than a child, a fleeting shadow in his memory. Could it really be her now? The wind carried the scent of rain, leather, and a faint trace of something floral, something he did not recognize, but which tugged at a memory buried deep. The hood dropped, and Jack's breath caught in his throat. "Remember me, cowboy?" the voice asked, soft but unwavering, cutting through the wind. Jack froze, the words slicing through years of quiet loneliness. His voice faltered. He could not speak, could not even move at first, as the storm raged around them. The girl from his past had returned, no longer a child, but a woman shaped by survival, her eyes holding both the pain and strength of the life she had led. The plains around them seemed to pause, waiting for his reaction, the wind whispering secrets of what was to come. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating her features with startling clarity. Her hair, dark and wild, whipped across her face, and her gaze locked on him with a mixture of recognition and challenge. Jack's memories surged, blending with the present, the fear, the flight, the small triumph of carrying her to safety through chaos. And now, she stood before him, unbroken, unafraid, demanding acknowledgement of a bond he had not realized he had carried with him every day since. The silence stretched. Jack's mind raced, unearthing fragments of long-buried guilt and hope. He had thought he had lived with his past, but it had only waited, patient and insistent, for the right moment to confront him. The storm at his back mirrored the storm inside him, turbulent, relentless, impossible to ignore. Finally, he found his voice, though it trembled. "It's really you." She nodded once, deliberately, a flicker of a smile touching her lips. There was a fire in her eyes, a declaration that she had survived, endured, and returned not to plead or seek vengeance, but to claim a connection that had never truly ended. Jack stepped back, hands brushing the railing, as if grounding himself to the earth that had shaped him, tested him, and now brought him face to face with a destiny he hadn't anticipated. The wind howled around them, carrying the distant rumble of thunder, yet there was a strange calm in the air between them. Years of memory, struggle, and unspoken promises hung suspended, a fragile thread linking the past to the present. She spoke again, quieter this time, but with a certainty that left no room for doubt. "I've returned to marry you." Jack's chest tightened. The words were both a gift and a challenge, an impossible weight tempered by the unyielding strength of the woman before him. He thought of the plains, the storms, the battles he had survived alone. And for the first time in years, he felt the tremor of something he had thought lost. Hope tethered to courage, ready to face whatever the world dared to throw at him next. The horizon broke into light, rain beginning to fall in gentle sheets across the dust-choked ground. Jack and the girl from his past, now a woman who had endured everything the frontier could throw at her, stood in silence, the weight of history and promise pressing between them. Neither spoke, yet the air shimmered with unspoken understanding. The past had returned, and with it a chance to reconcile, to fight, to survive, and perhaps to love. And as the storm moved on, leaving the plains drenched and glistening under a hesitant sun, Jack knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The storm had passed, leaving the plains shimmering with the fresh scent of rain. Jack led her into the cabin, the floorboards creaking under their weight. Nokomis, her name whispered through his mind like a prayer, moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived storms far harsher than this. She set her saddle down with deliberate care, her eyes scanning the modest interior as if reading the stories the walls might tell. Jack could hardly believe she had returned, grown into a woman forged by the harsh frontier, yet still bearing that spark of life he had first seen years ago. He busied himself with a kettle over the hearth, pretending to be occupied while stealing glances at her. She did not flinch under his gaze. Instead, she seemed to measure him, as though deciding whether the man he had become matched the memory she had carried all these years. "Your hands, they're strong," she said softly, almost to herself, but Jack heard it. She had been a child when he saved her, yet now her hands were calloused and capable, skilled in survival. It was a reminder that life had demanded far more from her than it ever had from him. Jack nodded, unable to find words. Silence stretched between them, filled with the crackle of the fire and the soft patter of rain against the roof. It was a quiet intimacy, the kind born of shared history and unspoken understanding. Outside, a figure emerged from the misty tree-line, moving with the stealth of someone who knew the land as well as any wolf or hawk. Tyanida. Jack froze, recognizing the silhouette of the native warrior from his years on the frontier, a man who had once been an enigma, now a potential ally. The tension was immediate. Jack's hand instinctively hovered over his revolver. Nokomis, however, relaxed, stepping slightly forward, a gesture of trust. Tyanida's eyes met Jack's briefly, unreadable and wary. Without a word, he nodded and gestured toward the cabin, indicating he had no hostile intent. But Jack's mistrust did not fade so easily. The frontier had taught him that appearances could deceive, that survival depended on knowing friend from foe in a heartbeat. The tension shattered when a wolf leapt from the underbrush, teeth bared and eyes glowing in the dim light. Jack reacted instinctively, but it was Tyanida who intercepted, swinging a makeshift spear with precision that left no room for error. The wolf yelped and fled into the woods, and in that moment, trust was quietly brokered. Tyanida had saved them, and Jack could not ignore the silent debt owed. Over the next few days, the trio established a routine that balanced work and wariness. Nokomis and Jack repaired fences, fed the horses, and tended to the small garden. Their silence spoke volumes. Every glance, every gesture reinforced bonds that words could not capture. And all the while, the wind whispered warnings from the north. Bandits had been seen on the roads, roaming like shadows in search of easy prey. Jack knew the territory well, every ridge and hollow, every stand of trees that could conceal danger. He had survived ambushes, storms, and the harsh cruelty of isolation, but the thought of protecting Nokomis added a new weight to his shoulders. He had faced death alone before, but now the stakes were more personal. She had returned to him, not as a helpless child, but as a force to be reckoned with, and he had to ensure she survived what was coming. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and cast long shadows across the plains, Tyanida spoke for the first time. His voice was low, gravelly, carrying authority and quiet experience. He warned of a gang moving closer, ruthless men with guns and no allegiance except greed. Jack listened, absorbing the implications. Man versus man. The frontier had never been kind to those who hesitated, and hesitation could mean death. Nokomis watched the exchange with calm determination, understanding danger in ways Jack sometimes failed to see. She stepped close to him, her hand brushing his arm in a gesture both protective and grounding. He felt an unfamiliar warmth, a tether to something stronger than survival alone. That night, around a flickering fire, Jack reflected on the years he had spent in solitude. Memories of lost friends, of battles fought and comrades left behind, crowded his mind. But now, with Nokomis beside him and Tyanada standing silently as a sentinel, he felt a spark of purpose he had long thought extinguished. Survival was no longer merely about endurance. It was about protecting those who mattered and facing the storms that would come with courage and trust. The wind carried faint noises from the distance. Hoofbeats, voices, laughter, bandits. The realization sent a shiver down his spine. It was accompanied by a strange, fierce exhilaration. For the first time in years, he felt fully alive, every nerve alert, every sense sharpened. Nokomis' presence anchored him. Tyanada's skill reassured him, and together they formed a fragile but formidable line against the uncertainty of the frontier. As darkness settled, Jack and Nokomis sat close, watching the stars emerge through the clearing clouds. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he felt the weight of the past and the hope of the present entwine. They knew danger was coming, that the plains would test them with fire, bullets, and the wildness of the land itself. But in this moment, trust had begun to root, quiet and unspoken, promising strength for the trials ahead. The night deepened, carrying whispers of threat and resilience alike. And as Jack stared into the flickering flames, he understood the truth he had long avoided. The frontier was not just a place of survival, but of connection, courage, and the quiet forging of hearts bound by history, trust, and an unbreakable will. The days grew hotter, the sun beating down on the plains like a relentless drum. Jack rode out at dawn, scouting the surrounding ridges, while Nokomis followed on horseback, her movements sure and precise. Tyanada shadowed them silently, eyes scanning the horizon, ears attuned to every whisper of wind or rustle of brush. The tension was thick, a living thing that pressed against their backs as the threat of bandits loomed ever closer. It was mid-afternoon when the first signs appeared. Hoof prints in the soft soil, broken branches, and the faint smell of smoke carried on the wind. Jack's jaw tightened. The gang was near, clever, and dangerous, and there would be no warning before their attack. He glanced at Nokomis, who met his gaze with calm resolve. She had faced death before, and the fire in her eyes reminded him that courage was not measured by age, but by heart. The first confrontation came suddenly. From a ridge, two bandits emerged, guns leveled, eyes glinting with cruelty. Jack reacted instinctively, shouting a warning as he fired his revolver. Nokomis rolled to the side, ducking behind a rock, and returned fire with precision that belied her years. Tyanada's spear whistled through the air, disarming one of the attackers with deadly accuracy. The skirmish escalated quickly, a blur of gunfire, dust, and shouts. Jack felt the old thrill of danger, tempered now by the weight of responsibility. He could not afford hesitation. Every second mattered. The bandits retreated briefly, regrouping, but the warning was clear. They would return, stronger and more ruthless. As night fell, the trio regrouped in the cabin. Jack nursed a graze on his arm, while Nokomis cleaned the horses and tended to minor injuries. Tyanada worked silently, inspecting the perimeter and setting traps for the expected return. The silence between them was filled with shared understanding. Words were unnecessary. The fight had spoken for them. Around the fire, Jack's mind wandered. He remembered the boy he had been, reckless and eager to prove himself, and the man he had become, hardened by loss and solitude. Now, faced with the responsibility of protecting Nokomis, he wrestled with doubt. Could he defend her? Could he survive the coming storm? The answers were uncertain, but the resolve in her eyes gave him strength he had not felt in years. The next morning brought a storm of a different kind. Rain lashed against the cabin, thunder rolling across the plains. Through the window, Jack saw movement, shapes moving through the mist. The bandits had returned, more numerous and better armed. A wave of adrenaline surged through him. This was the moment that would test everything: courage, trust, skill, and heart. The fight began with a barrage of gunfire. Jack and Nokomis ducked behind the wooden beams, Tyanida moving like a shadow through the chaos, striking and retreating with precision. The cabin shuddered under bullets and the pounding of hooves. Every instinct Jack had honed in years of survival screamed at him, guiding his movements, sharpening his senses. Amid the chaos, Jack faltered for a moment. Memories of past failures, the friends he could not save, the lives lost under his watch, clawed at him. He froze, heart pounding, until Nokomis' hand brushed his arm, grounding him. Her gaze did not plead or command. It simply reminded him of the man he could be. That small gesture was enough. He rose, firing with renewed purpose, moving with the fluid precision of a man who had finally reclaimed himself. By dawn, the bandits had been driven off, their retreat marked by the echoes of gunfire fading into the mist. The cabin bore the scars of the night: splintered wood, broken windows, but the people inside had survived. Jack, Nokomis, and Tyanida stood among the wreckage, breathing heavily, bodies bruised but unbroken. The ordeal left more than physical scars. Jack felt something shift within him, a transformation subtle yet undeniable. He had faced the storm of the past and emerged stronger, tempered by love, trust, and resilience. Nokomis had not only survived, but had thrived, her courage igniting something in him that he had thought long dead. And Tyanida, once an enigma, had become a companion forged in the crucible of survival, a silent guardian whose presence was now indispensable. That night, as the fire crackled and the rain eased to a soft drizzle, Jack sat with Nokomis and Tyanida. Words were few, but the weight of shared experience hung in the air. Jack reached for Nokomis' hand, and she did not pull away. In the quiet aftermath of chaos, trust had been cemented, and a bond that transcended words had formed. Jack knew the frontier would never be safe, that storms, bandits, and the wild would always test them. Yet for the first time in years, he felt an unshakable certainty. They could endure together. Nokomis' presence reminded him that courage was not solitary, that survival was not merely about fighting the world, but about choosing who to stand beside. And as dawn broke over the wet plains, painting the sky in muted golds and grays, Jack allowed himself a rare thought, a vision of what could be. A life built not just on survival, but on trust, loyalty, and the tentative stirrings of love. The frontier was still perilous, and the future uncertain, but Jack felt ready to face it. With Nokomis at his side, and Tyanida as ally, he was no longer a man alone. The storm had passed, but a new journey had begun, a path fraught with danger and choice, yet illuminated by courage, resilience, and the fragile, unspoken hope of the heart. The night air was thick with tension, the plains shrouded in mist and the scent of smoke from distant fires. Jack's cabin stood as a lone sentinel against the encroaching threat, its walls battered from previous skirmishes, the ground around it pockmarked by hoof prints and broken branches. The bandits had returned, larger and more ruthless than before, their laughter carrying on the wind like a herald of destruction. Jack's fingers tightened around the grip of his revolver, the familiar weight grounding him. Nokomi stood beside him, her eyes sharp and steady, her bow strung and ready. Tyanida crouched at the edge of the clearing, his spear glinting in the moonlight. No words were exchanged. There was no need. Each knew the stakes. Each understood that failure meant death. The first shots rang out, sharp cracks that echoed across the plains. Bullets tore through the cabin's walls, splintering wood and sending shards across the floor. Jack ducked behind a beam, returning fire with calm precision. Nokomis let an arrow fly, striking a bandit mid-charge, the shot precise and merciless. Tyanida moved like a shadow, a whirlwind of deadly efficiency, striking, disarming, disappearing into the mist. Chaos reigned. Gunfire, screams, and the roar of startled animals filled the night. Jack felt his pulse hammer in his ears, but amidst the adrenaline, he felt clarity. He had faced death before, but never like this. Not with lives he cared for entwined so tightly with his own. He fired, ducked, rolled, and struck with the kind of focus only desperation could hone. Then it happened. A bandit broke through Tyanida's flank, swinging a heavy club. The warrior parried but stumbled, taking a glancing blow. Jack's heart lurched as he realized the man who had saved them countless times lay vulnerable. Without hesitation, Jack sprang into action, driving the attacker back with the butt of his revolver. Nokomi's fired again, her arrow felling another assailant, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. Tyanida staggered, clutching his side, blood dark against the moonlit night. Jack knelt beside him for a heartbeat, feeling the weight of mortality press against his chest. "Stay with me," Jack murmured, gripping the warrior's shoulder. Nokomi's pressed her hand to Tyanida's wound, steadying him, her quiet courage a balm amidst the chaos. The bond between them, once tentative, was now forged in fire, unbreakable. The battle raged until dawn, the sky bleeding orange and red over the horizon. Finally, the last of the bandits fled, leaving behind the scars of their fury, trampled earth, broken fences, and the exhausted, bruised figures of the trio who had endured. Jack sank to the ground, chest heaving, feeling every ache, every wound, every moment of fear and determination. Nokomi's fell beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. Tyanida remained on the edge, leaning heavily against a tree, eyes scanning for any lingering threat. Silence descended, broken only by the soft moan of the wind through the broken branches. Jack looked at Nokomi's, at the woman who had returned to him after years of separation, who had faced every trial and danger without faltering. His chest ached, not from the fight, but from the overwhelming realization that he had found something he had long believed lost: hope, love, and purpose. Tyanida's voice was low, steady, carrying across the clearing. "The land tests all who walk it. You survived because you stood together." Jack nodded, understanding the depth of the statement. The frontier was cruel, unforgiving, and relentless, but had also revealed who they truly were and what they were capable of when trust and courage guided them. Nokomi's raised her eyes to Jack, her expression soft but resolute. "We've endured," she said, "and now we choose." Her words, simple yet profound, carried the weight of survival, choice, and the fragile promise of a future together. Jack reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. In that moment, the plains around them, the storm-tossed land, the remnants of battle, the scars of survival, faded into insignificance. What mattered was the bond they had forged, the trust that had blossomed amidst chaos, and the love that had quietly grown, unyielding. Tyanida rose slowly, a silent acknowledgement passing between the three of them. The warrior had become more than an ally. He was a guardian of hope, a witness to the evolution of trust and courage in a world that demanded both. Jack watched him walk toward the edge of the tree line, his figure fading into the mist, leaving them with the bittersweet knowledge that even heroes sometimes had paths apart from those they protected. The sun climbed higher, casting the plains in muted golds and grays, illuminating the scars of the night, yet also revealing the quiet beauty of survival. Jack and Nokomi stood together, surveying the land they had defended. There were no grand declarations, no sweeping celebrations, only the silent, profound understanding that they had faced the frontier and emerged not just alive, but transformed. Jack spoke, voice quiet but firm, carrying across the wind and mist. "We'll build from here. Whatever comes, we face it together." Nokomi smiled faintly, her hand squeezing his. "Together," she echoed. The word hung in the air, simple yet full of promise, a lifeline in a world that demanded resilience, courage, and love. Yet the frontier remained as unforgiving as ever. Storms would return. Bandits would come again. Life would test them in ways they could not yet foresee. But in that moment, they had learned the true measure of survival: trust in one another, courage to face fear, and the willingness to fight for what mattered most. Jack's gaze wandered to the horizon, where morning light touched the plains, painting them in a quiet, hopeful hue. He thought of the past, of the girl he had saved, and of the woman she had become. He thought of Tyanida, of the bond that had formed in silence and action. And he understood something he had always known but only truly felt now. The frontier could break men and women, but it could also reveal the strength they carried within, the courage to endure, and the capacity to love against all odds. The camera of imagination lingers on the three figures, framed by the misty plains and the rising sun, symbols of resilience, trust, and the delicate triumph of human spirit amidst chaos. And as the wind whispers across the grasses, a quiet, poignant truth emerges. Survival is not enough. To live fully is to face fear, embrace connection, and dare to hope. Jack turned to Nokomi's, and their eyes met, unspoken words binding them more tightly than any oath. "The past brought us here," he said softly. "The future is ours to shape." Nokomi smiled, a flicker of joy tempered by the knowledge of hardship yet to come. They walked back toward the cabin, hands clasped, hearts aligned, stepping into a life defined not by solitude or fear, but by trust, resilience, and love. The story fades with the plains stretching endlessly into the horizon, the echoes of battle replaced by the quiet rhythm of survival. And in a soft, cinematic voiceover, Jack speaks directly to the audience. Out here on the frontier, every choice matters, every bond is earned, and every life is a story of courage. If this tale stirred your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There are more stories waiting in the dust, waiting to remind us that even in the harshest lands, hope and trust can thrive.